great-grandfather is buried in that cemetery. So if you go in there and see the Sims, this is where my trip to grandma was like. So it was like driving up to grandma up here, but love this part of the state, and I'm so blessed to be here. Today, you're going to learn how to inspire kids, and you're going to hear an amazing story that will hopefully help you this year in your lessons or in your classes. I'm going to start off with our first memory. Think about your first memory, especially a negative memory. This is the house I grew up in. I was 4 years old, and to the right of that house, you see, or actually to the left, 2 houses over, I was playing stickball with my neighbor. All the neighborhood game was over there. I was 4 years old. The kid pitching to me was 9, so he was 3 times the size I was. He struck me out, making fun of me. Classic bullying. And the next kid in the neighborhood, the kid who lived across the street went up. He was getting struck out. I thought, this is going to end. So I got a stick, went up behind him, and as hard as I could, pow, right in the posterior. Do y'all see the door to the left over there under the porch, okay? My eye was on that door. My mom was inside of the kitchen. If I got in that door, the neighbor could not go in the house and beat me up, right? So I'm running as fast as I can. I didn't make it. I got about to the left of the blue car. I'm going to see that this is not the time when this happened, but I got to my yard. I fell down, I rolled over, and I put my hands up like this, and it was like the Matrix. JD was over me, he threw the stick at me, and it was slow motion. That stick went right through my fingers and hit me in my right eye. That was the last clear image I ever saw of that eye. Now I'm blessed. This eye is a lazy eye. It looks over here. So on the first day of school, I'm still in the classroom. I start, kids come back to my name, but on the first day of school, I have to tell that story because my left eye looks this way, my right eye looks that way. So my students don't know what I'm looking at, so I have to tell them why my eyes don't look in the same place, okay? To the teachers out here, try to think of a bad memory you had, a valley in your childhood that helped shape you into who you are. So our kids need these stories. Our kids are getting their problems solved, and we need to help them make up solutions to solve their problems. They need to learn that those valleys will determine their future, and it will help them get to their why, which is the ultimate purpose of education. So, obviously, having my right eye poked out, I couldn't play athletics, I couldn't do a lot of things. The decisions in my childhood were altered. And that was profound because I had a grudge on that. This is the picnic table. When I was in college, this is where I did this was my office. And I had no idea what I was going to be when I was in college. I had no idea. I went to school as an athletic trainer because I couldn't play. It paid tuition and books. So if JD wouldn't have thrown that stick in my eye, I don't know how college would have been paid. But I sat on that picnic table just a lot of quiet time, like I wanted to wake up and make a difference in the world. And that place is still very special to me. Hopefully we all end up with a place like that where we can go to when we're down and out. That's in Fort Nature's Park by Beaumont. In 1986, who remembers this movie? Okay, some of y'all are old enough to actually watch this movie in the movie theaters. My senior year in college, Navy recruiter came in. This came out in 1986. I graduated college in 1990. I could have been, I minored in math, so I had the math, I had the college classes to become a naval pilot. I was like, man, I'm going to be maverick. I'm going to the Navy. I had uncles that went to the armed forces. They retired. And eventually started teaching, and they had dual incomes. You get all the benefits. It's like, this is my it. This is what I'm going to end up doing for the rest of my life. I went to downtown Houston to sign the paperwork, and the recruiting officer asked me about my vision. Do I have 20/20 in both eyes? And I told him about my eye injury, He handed me back his papers, and he said, "I'm sorry, the Navy or any other armed forces you can't even be drafted because you have to have 20/20 out of both eyes." I left devastated. And that happened over and over in my childhood, that right eye injury. It was like a hindrance to me. I thought it was keeping me from my why. Why do I want to be here on this planet? In 1990, I got hired on at Teague ISD. Imagine being hired yesterday and the principal says, "Can you be at convocation tomorrow?" That's what happened to me. I was in the Beaumont area. It was a 5-hour drive. I got hired about 2 p.m., packed up my car, everything, and left to Teague ISD. The first thing I had to do as a teacher was write my classroom rules, and it was clairvoyance. I wrote, "Always believe in yourself," as my first rule. My mentor teacher looked at me and said, "This is a great idea, but you can't make a kid believe in who they are. Your rules need to be able to be enforced." She was right. You can't make them, but you can inspire them. How many teachers in here have a tub of letters like this? Does anyone say these? Kids, if y'all look around, teachers don't throw these away. These are letters from 30 years of teachers keep them. I should have these like in a scrapbook. But this is the treasure chest of teaching. 2 of the most important days of your life. The day you're born and the day you find out why. When I graduated from college, I had no idea why I was on this planet. The spring of my first year teaching, I was in my classroom. I wanted to go to the Navy, right? I believe, of December 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and I was in Killeen, Texas at Fort Hood. They were painting everything from forest camo to desert camo, and everything was going to Kuwait from Fort Hood on trains every night. And I was sitting there thinking of this, and then one evening after school, I was in my classroom having my daily clock time. If I were to go to the Navy, I would probably be in Kuwait. And I was thinking how blessed I was to be teaching the kids. I was teaching low-level kids. Kids back then, you could graduate from high school with consumer math, pre-algebra, and fundamentals of math. I didn't even take algebra 1. And I was teaching consumer math, and I was making a difference in these kids, and all of the dots in my life were connected. If you look at those first 3 things on the left-hand side, have y'all had training on ACEs, acute childhood experiences? Those are acute childhood experiences. And they affect how you learn. And our kids during COVID had a lot of these. And we have to learn how to overcome them. That was an amazing evening in my life after school that day. All the dots of my life were connected. I knew my why, and I knew I was making kids believe in who they are. 30 years later, I know how this works. And we're not taught how this works. And hopefully, students, y'all experience a day like this where you wake up and you want to go to work. You do not want to be 30 years old, waking up, hating your job. Because life's miserable. I have friends that do that. The best thing we can do for our kids, the teachers that were called out up here, somehow have figured out how to love the kids. I encourage you to go back before school starts, write this down, fill it in, and write down 4 actions you're going to do to love the kids. Because we're simply not taught how to love kids. No one's ever taught me how to love the students. And I've worked with people who couldn't figure this out. And it's not easy with a 14-year-old, hormonal, self-centered, egotistical teenager that you're having to teach. Somehow you're having to make them go from standard form to vertex form on a quadratic function. But you've got to be able to do this. Write down 4 actions. Love is generated. It's a verb. When I was in a staff development one year, I made this up. This is how I generate love with my kids. And this makes all the difference. When you love the kids, it sets forth a series of events where inspiration is possible. And the kids know when you love them. Love them just the way they are, not because they're following the rules. That's huge. This is something I found when I was writing my book, The Art of Inspiration. If you're described by universal positive attributes, you become a source of inspiration. And we're not taught how to do this. These are non-verbally generated. Think about your nonverbal communication as the words people use to describe who you are. The climate of this school district, the climate of this building is determined by what the kids describe the adults with. What words are the kids describing all of the adults in the school with? That is the climate of the building. Do you want to go to work at Chick-fil-A? A place that feels like Chick-fil-A. That is what Chick-fil-A does. In 1991, by spring of my first year, after I found out my why, I was reading this pocket Bible, which is older than a lot of y'all in here. And I made it my goal to be these words. Most of y'all know where these words come from. The tub of letters I just showed you. The kids are writing letters to me, and they're using these words to describe who I am. And it blew my mind away when I looked at that. I'm non-verbally generating these words. This is something, as educators, we need to be taught how to do. The key is everyone in this room is going to generate these words differently. I think that's why we're not taught how to do this. So one of the things I did in my book that I wrote is how these words become to life in terms of education. How does an educator make these words happen in their classroom? When you do this, your name's going to get called out up here. You're going to inspire kids. And if you inspire them to believe, you teach the greatest lesson they'll ever have in their whole life. This is on my desk. You become the words your mind dwells on. I still look at these words every day. And I got to be these words. Something else I also started doing last year, I started writing a journal every morning. And I write down kids who need me. And it's amazing, like I write down kids' names and like they're having something wrong with them that I didn't know about. But focus and make these words come reality in the life of your kids. Do whatever it takes. If you read my book, it goes through a series and you write down like how am I going to make those words come to life. Something else. In 1989, a little ditty in my head said, start writing down these phrases I'm thinking of. I wrote this down before I even knew what I was going to be. And isn't this the role of a teacher? This book contains hundreds, I think over 965 phrases I've written down, and most of them deal with joy. But this is the first thing, I just started thinking of these things up. And this is pretty powerful. I read back through this and I see how these phrases have come to fruit in my life. Most of them talk about joy. Ladies and gentlemen, if you generate joy with the kids, you're in this career for the long haul. Your job will generate joy if you do it right. This is taken at a summer camp I worked at for 19 summers. I was a camp photographer, and I took pictures of the happiest moments of a kid's life. And it was amazing. This camp was special. Okay? And that book, that journal, I think, is over 100 phrases of how joy is generated. And it happens when kids describe you and who you are. This is an amazing diagram I wrote. Where do all the arrows start? You got to figure out how to love the kids. And once you do that, look at that. All those other descriptors are going to happen in your life. And where do all the arrows end up with? They end up in joy. To the kids that are looking at this, when you get older, you want to be doing this. You want to have a job where this is happening in your life. Because if your job is generating joy, your life will have meaning and purpose. This is huge. and we non-verbally generate these to the kids. If this happens in your career, you're teaching these kids something that far exceeds the academic goals of your teams. And I guarantee you, when they're inspired to believe, growth mindset happens. Now I'm going to tell you a story about Josh. Think about the most influential student you've ever had. Okay? Josh was the most influential student I ever taught. He made my life miserable for 50 minutes with his influence. The worst kid I ever taught, still to this day. This child really developed patience in my career. If you look back at it, the influential kids you have, that patience is huge. But I basically gave up on Josh. I knew his pathway was headed toward the Huntsville State Prison. And I said words to him I should have never said. And we've all done that in our career. And that's where patience, you cannot take back the words you say to these kids. He was a 16-year-old 8th grader who did not want to be in school. I had classes of 16-year-old 8th graders when I was at Teague ISD. And that, you got to teach them math, right? About 8 years later, he's in his mid-20s. I'm selling pumpkins at a pumpkin patch for the youth at the church. It was a fundraiser. Car drives up, a guy gets out with a lady and like a toddler girl, 2 or 3 year old girl. They're going to get a pumpkin for the girl. The guy runs up to me and says, "Mr. Toups," and gives me a hug. I have no idea who this guy is. Then he looks at me and says, "Mr. Toups, it's Josh. You remember Josh?" And I looked at him, it's like, "You made my life miserable for a year." This is one of the greatest days of my life. He told me, "Mr. Toups, I finally started believing." I know he told me he was sorry. I believe he was going into an electrician, and he was using the math I was teaching him. He said he was sorry. He said he was learning, but he never, eventually, the always believed thing hit him. And I gave up on this guy. And eventually he became a functional adult in society. And as a teacher, that was a huge moment in my life, probably one of the greatest moments of my career. This belief finally hit him, and he was the worst kid I ever taught, or most influential kid I ever taught. Never, ever, ever give up on any of these kids. Keep loving the kids just the way they are, and if you read that, you're planting a seed, aren't you? Your influence will stay with them. But you never, ever, ever give up on these kids. This is the genesis of growth mindset. If you want to learn how to get your star scores up, it starts with this. If you inspire a kid to believe, their growth mindsets. I've had kids go from 30% on star up to 70s and 80s, doubling their star score because they believe. And are we taught how to inspire kids? And it's the greatest that's my mission in life now, is to spread this to educators so that you will impact the kids of your community. Because I've seen this happen in my career, and I want to empower you with the ability to do this. This is why we're in education. We're in education to give our kids hope. Every single one of you in here can end up being this person. This was drawn on the back of one of my test answer sheets. This is within your power if you do this. When you inspire kids to believe, you'll be superheroed like this. And I've had a blessed career, and I don't want to leave the classroom. I'm still in the classroom. And I love what I do, because I know I make a difference in the kid's life. Lastly, I'll leave you with this image. All of you in here have the power to make these kids believe. You all have the power to become sources of inspiration. And you are going to succeed at this. Remember, you are amazing. You were created to do wonderful things. And always believe. Thank you so much for being a great audience.